Hi, folks. Thank you again for coming to Back to Basics for Season 3. Today, we're going to speak with Celia Daniels. What she's all about is we're going to talk about is transgender. That's right. We're going to talk about transgender. Now, there are some few questions that we all have as to what it is, what is a being, what have you. And today's the episode for that. It is going to be an uncomfortable episode today, but it's going to be an amazing episode because I feel that we need to start educating people as to what it is all about. So let's go and stop talking to me and let's go and talk to our guest today and on to Back to Basics. I'll see you there. I'll talk to you. Hi, folks. Thank you again for coming on to Back to Basics. We are going to be speaking with our guest, and we're going to, as I said on the intro, we're going to have a fabulous time. We're going to talk about transgender. Yes, that's right. And we did talk about that briefly on the intro. Now, the thing is that there's a lot of questions that I have. There's a lot of questions that you have. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So instead of wasting time talking to me, why don't we talk to our guest to understand what is this topic all about and who is this person? So stop talking to me and let's go to the guest. How about that? How are you, Selena? How are you? Thank you for coming on Back to Basics.
Oh, thank you so much, Girish. Sure. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
No, absolutely. The honor is definitely mine. So before we talk about the basics of the transgender and what you have gone through and all the who's and what's and whys,
Mm.
what does back to basic mean to you?
Back to basic is keeping it simple. It's like keep it simple, stupid. People say that. There's one person, they say KISS is keep it simple, stupid. And there was one person holding on to during a conversation that was very complex. And I remember that was a joke that was being told many years back. I remember that. And sometimes it's always easy when it's simple and going down to the basics and the framework of why we are having the conversation and getting to the nuts and bolts of the discussion. And to me, I think it really makes a lot of sense when we really get down to the basics rather than diving into complex topics.
Yeah,
We will
yeah.
get there, but starting from the basics.
Of course, definitely. It will get there. It just takes time and
Mm,
as we usually say, baby steps, right? And then that's just what we
right.
thank you again for coming on Back to Basics, and thank you again for answering that simple question that we usually ask our guests. Let me ask you this. It is not an easy topic at all, okay, for a lot of people. Definitely, I'm going to be honest with you. It's very uncomfortable for me also. But the thing is that
Mm,
you made me very comfortable when we spoke, in the pre-call that we had between you and
mhm.
me. So I think you and I are going to be great friends even offline. So thank you again for supporting me on the small podcast that I have here.
Oh,
So
thank you.
so the question that I have is, what is transgender? That's the first question out of the bat.
Absolutely. So transgender folks are folks who are born, who don't identify in the gender they are born. So, for instance, I was born as male. My sex at my birth is male, and I didn't identify, or I did not identify as male when I was born. After I was born, I was more focused on. It was running in my head that I am a girl, and I kept telling my mom that I'm a girl. So the word transgender is also the opposite of transgender is called cisgender, where a person identifies in the gender they are born, they're called cisgender. For instance, Girish, you yourself, you identify in the gender you're born and you're called a cisgender, which is CIS gender. And transgender are folks who don't identify in the gender they're born.
Wow,
That's the
that
simple.
wow, that's crazy because I had a question about that because
Mm,
um there's agender, there's cisgender, there's what is it called? Cross-dressing.
mhm,
So now the question is, I know what cross-dressing is, and everyone knows that, but what's the
mm.
difference between trans and cross-gender?
Cross-dressing, yeah. So I think let's go down to one basic framework that I wanted to the audience to understand. So the trans folks, they go through something called gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is a medical condition where there's an incongruence between your birth gender and your authentic gender. What I mean is, gender dysphoria is in a scale, it's a spectrum, like an autistic spectrum. In a scale of 1 to 10, some of them will have a gender dysphoria as 10, and they really go for medical transition. Some of them probably are in a 1 or maybe in a 2, and they don't feel that the gender dysphoria is so high, and they still want to socially express themselves. It could be in form of a social way of going out, and that's where cross-dressing comes out,
Mm,
where they express themselves saying that, I feel like a girl, I feel excited to see myself as a girl, and I want to do it. And cross-dressing is very, I would say, a very colloquial term, and it came from the word called transvestism, transvestites. That's the right terminology.
mm,
And transvestites are more focused on the clothing rather than the actual reason as to why they're doing it. So even cross-dressing is more about the clothing. And when you ask a question to a person who is cross-dressing as to why are you cross-dressing, they'll say, I just like to cross-dress. Nobody likes to cross-dress in another clothing.
mm,
They do it because the gender dysphoria is, they have gender dysphoria, and it's not in a scale of 1 to 10. It's probably at a very minimal level.
mm,
For a transgender person, it can be more than 5, or in a scale of 8, where the person feels like, I'm probably around 8, where I cannot medically transition. So there's 4 types of transition. One is personal, social, legal, and medical.
mm,
So social transition is when you come out, and when the personal transition is first the one thing, where you come out and you accept yourself that I am a trans person,
mm,
and I you accept that. That's the first and the basic one. That's called the personal transition. The second one is social transition, where you express your identity. Now that I know I am a trans person, I want to express my identity in the community where I am living in, being a part of it, being socially trying to find social acceptance. That's called social transition. And
mm,
then you have legal transition, where you legally go and change your name because you feel that this is my identity and I want my identity to be more legalized. So I can work in a workplace where I can run a business, or I can get a credit card, banking, you start working on that. And medical transition is when you medically transition, where you do the surgery. It's called GAS, gender affirmation surgery. So that's the spectrum of transition that
mm,
happens for a transgender person. They go through the whole spectrum of transition. Some of them just stay at social transition.
mm,
They don't have to medically transition. For instance, I am only socially transitioned. I don't think I wanted to medically transition because I have medical issues. I have a lot of medical issues. I have cholesterol. I had recently a heart, I would say, a cardiac arrest,
mm,
and so much going on in my life that I cannot afford to have another hormonal change within my body.
mm,
My heart rate is very low. My ejection fraction went very low. So I'm coping up with a lot of medical conditions.
mm,
So it's important for me to take care of myself, and I can still express myself as Celia in the society, in the community, in my workplace.
mm.
And I do that today, and it's possible. So that's the in a nutshell what is the different spectrum within the transgender community.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you again for explaining all the four bits of it and four pies of it about that. You and I actually talked about.
Mm.
I'm gonna go in bits and pieces.
Yeah, yeah,
Four things, if you don't mind. Uh,
sure.
One is your personal.
Mm.
When did you actually feel that you are ready to speak about you, yourself, and y-
Mhm.
alone first before we go to the social part? Because I think there's a battle between you, yourself, and I. That are you ready or are you not? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I can exactly tell you. This was in 2000 in Colorado.
Okay.
I was in the Colorado National Monument. I was sitting there, and I had put on my clothing as Celia, and I was sitting there and telling myself that, am I really trans? Is it something that I should call? What if people call me transgender? It was so powerful for me that I did not want to be trans. My whole life, I didn't want to be trans.
Mm,
But I knew I was different when I was 4 years old.
mm,
I was always trying to hide that because when you're born in another gender, sorry, when you're born as a male and you're thinking in another gender, you're always pretending that this is just an act you're
mm,
putting up an act that you are a boy and you're trying to get along in the society, get along in the school, so you can avoid bullying, you can avoid a lot of other discrimination that you can go through,
mm,
that people go through, especially the trans kids.
mm,
So that was the day when I said, okay, I am trans. I need to accept this and I need to start thinking about my life as to how it's going to be. And that acceptance took almost 42 years,
mm,
really coming out to myself. And a lot of trans folks, you know you're different from an early age, but you don't act upon it.
mm,
Sometimes you act upon it at a very early age. Sometimes you take many, many years to act upon it. So for me, it took 42 years.
mm,
And that was the day I remember that I just went back home thinking, okay, I'm going to be a trans from
mm,
today. I'm
mm,
going to tell my wife about what is transgender. And I started reading articles, how to tell my wife and my family. My daughter was very young at the time. She was probably, 8 months old. But here I was having an 8-month-old daughter, and I was pretending as a cisgender man in a corporate industry. I was running healthcare solutions, and at the same time, my wife was. We were just starting off our lives as an immigrant family here in this country,
mm.
and I was really scared to tell her that sweetheart, I'm trans, and I did not want to tell her. I was so scared, but I just kept it to myself, and that was the day.
Yeah, thank you again for the explaining the whole transition in your mind before we go to the social side of things. But let me ask you this, because there are two parts of the social actually,
Mm.
because where you came from, and then on top of that, you had to go and confront that with your wife before you go out to the social, which means outside of
Mhm.
your vicinity, right? That was a tough battle, wasn't it? Between the two.
Right.
I mean, you got the country, which where you came from, um, and now here in the States, but then you're battling it with your wife. And how is that different between the two?
It was very hard because once you accept yourself, it's a matter of telling someone and they affirming it.
Mm,
My wife was not very affirming. She said, you're not gay. I know there are a lot of men who are very fetish and there are cross dressers. And if you want to just wear women's clothes, go for it. But I don't think you are transgender.
mm,
Then I told, sweetheart, I'm expressing what is inside of me. I don't know what is inside of me.
mm,
What you see outside as a cross-dresser is more of the internal expression of my identity, and I know that that's something different.
mm,
So it was really hard when I told her. I remember on 11:30 in the night in Florida, 2003, I came out to her and I told her, sweetheart, this is me, and I want to tell you this.
mm,
The first thing, she wasn't surprised. She wasn't like blown away because I honestly went and had a conversation with her.
mm,
And I said, I want you to help me because I'm struggling with it. Since I was a child, I've been struggling with it.
mm,
She felt like she wanted to help me and she said, why don't you go talk to a therapist? And I started talking to a therapist. He heard me for 2 hours and he told me that I was a feminine gay.
mm,
And I was blown away. I said, you're actually confusing sexual orientation and gender identity because my sexual orientation is kind of heterosexual, that I am not interested in men, even today.
mm,
But I'm only interested in women. You can call me a lesbian if you want, but that's not my sexual. That's not my identity.
mm,
So he confused both and put it in a packet and said, "I know people like you, and there are a lot of feminine gay." And I think the reason is there was not much of education around this. Only they saw the gay community. Even in India, when they see trans people, they think they are gay. They are
mm,
not gay.
mm,
Trans people are transgender because they are having a gender identity. They deal with gender identity, not sexual orientation,
mm,
which people confuse.
mm,
So that's where I felt like I need to educate myself when I started telling her. And she was very much worried about the society. Like in India, we say, Log kya kahenge? They're all there. What will people say if you transition? Everyone is going to think
mm,
about it. You have a great job. You're a client partner for a great company. Why are you doing this?
mm,
And I could not stop being who I am. And at the same time, I was struggling with it.
mm.
So that was, I'll just stop here because there's so much of things to unpack in this whole conversation. But I wanted to give time to the audience to ask more, some more information that they might be interested in.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for understanding, and thank you again for
Mm.
explaining that, because I think everyone should, whoever's listening here, and they're going to comment here, I'm pretty sure they
Mm.
are. They have to understand that every every individual has different stories and different hurdles that they go through. Maybe certain people is not going through what you went through,
Yeah.
but people have to understand that there are certain people who does. And how do you give an answer which you have never done? And just like the guy that you spoke with, he or she has no idea of what type of
Mm.
that we should, because I think we don't have that much education on it or understanding of it. Maybe is that the right word I should be using?
I would say, yeah, education or understanding is the right terminology or the right way to put it, because the science wasn't that advanced. Not too much of research had been done. And that's when I started my research phase of discovering who I am. I am a brown heterosexual man, and why am I wanting to wear women's clothes? Why am I wanting to feel that I'm a woman? What is going on with me? Is
Mm,
there something in my body or something in my chromosomes that tells me that I'm different, something in my anatomy that tells me I'm different? I started doing that exploration after that. And I have a science background. I worked with Indian Institute of Science. I worked in the first human genome project that came to India. So I was always looking for answers in science, and I did find answers. And I could now talk in length about it because of those discovery and what has happened in the late 2000, which
mm,
was around 2009. I started discovering myself.
mm. Yeah, thank you again for explaining about your personal and your social aspect of it, of where you have been.
Mm.
But now it's kind of hard to go and talk to other people of who you are. I mean, that's another
Mm.
hurdle, isn't it? And how do you go through that? And we'll get into that much
Mm.
much later. But let me ask you this here. There's a lot of people who talk about binaries and non-binaries and
Mm.
all that. The words that they're using. Uh,
Mm.
how do you explain that? I mean, do you
Sure.
call yourself binary and non-binary, or do you call yourself trans, or do you call yourself, I mean, can you explain that if you don't mind?
Absolutely. And this is my favorite topic. Thank you, Girish. So when you take, I explained about the cisgender and the transgender community.
Yes. Yes.
Then we can take the transgender community. That's the umbrella term for anybody who's within the transgender, who doesn't identify in the gender they are born. They are called transgender. Be it binaries, non-binaries, they are all under the transgender umbrella. So within the transgender umbrella, there are two categories. One is binaries and non-binaries.
Mm,
Binaries are folks who want to transition from one gender to the other, either male to female or female to male. They sometimes medically transition, sometimes they socially transition, but most importantly, they medically transition, so they can adhere in the society, adhere within those disclosures like male and female. They want to be known as a woman or known as a man, and that's the binaries where they transition, and they are called binaries. That's the binaries within the transgender community.
mm,
Now, when you take the non-binaries, these are folks who do not identify in any gender.
mm,
I identify as a gender non-binary because to me, I don't think that I adhere with a male or female gender. I feel that I'm a gender by myself, which is X.
mm,
I identify as gender non-binary, and gender non-binary is that where folks do not adhere to any of the binaries, and there could be gender neutral, gender fluid, the agender, bigender, gender non-conforming. All those categories come within the non-binary side of the trans umbrella.
mm,
So I think I usually explain using a slide. I have a slide that explains everything.
mm,
So the non-binary folks, mostly they start with a personal transition. All of them start with a personal transition. They go to the social transition. Probably they stay in social transition many times. And
mm,
some of them move to the medical transition too, where they take hormones, for instance, or they just do only facial feminization, or just they remove their breast. Sometimes they do breast augmentation for female, male to female. They do
mm,
breast augmentation, so they do a little bit of a minor change within the bodies. And sometimes they do when it's a binary, they do medical surgery, where they do the gender reassignment affirmation surgery.
mm,
So that is within these two binaries, the binaries and the gender non-binaries.
mm,
There are lots of these categories, and the social, medical, personal can fall anywhere within these categories where people, it's a personal journey they choose. Sometimes they say that I think I want to be a person who's socially transitioned, but I don't want to go to the medical side.
mm,
They don't go to the medical side. Some of them feel like they want to go all the way for the gender affirmation surgery. Some of them do not. So that's where I think this is the whole concept of binaries and non-binaries within the transgender umbrella
mm.
comes in.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining all the umbrellas. And I wish we had that diagram that we could explain
Mm,
to people. But I'm pretty sure people can connect with you and get the diagram and understand what that umbrella is all about. So thank you again for explaining that.
okay.
Before we go to the next topic, there's a new section or new rapid fire round that we came up with. And in this rapid fire round, there are some words and some sentences which whatever pops in your head, and we'll just go from there. How about that?
Absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. So the first word is going to be personal.
To me, personal is my safe space,
Hmm.
my body, my safe space, and that's personal.
Hmm. Social.
Social is the community outside my body, outside my realm, my core area, which is outside.
Hmm.
I consider that as social.
Hmm. Legal.
Legalities are social constructs and structures within the society to help navigate through the societal infrastructure. That's more legal.
Hmm. How about medical?
Medical is to treat a person and their anatomy and what they're going through.
Hmm. Love.
Love is unconditional.
Battle.
Battle is a challenge we go through every day.
Hmm. KISS.
KISS, this is what I wanted to say. Keep it stupid. Just keep it simple, stupid, which is KISS. But I feel KISS is affection, love.
Okay. Emotions.
Emotions are, they help me. Sometimes they are in favor of me, for favor for me, and sometimes they are not in my favor. So
Hmm. Okay. Um, Gender.
gender is a social construct.
Labels.
Labels are boxes where we put people into.
Demographic.
Demographics are boundaries where people live in different parts of the world, in the universe, and also it can be across the galaxy too.
Hmm. Awesome. And the last two is going to be you.
I am a human being.
Okay. And the last word is going to be back to basics.
Back to basics is simplifying the basic things in life and going back to the basics of understanding what is the bare minimum, what is the bare essential for us. How do we understand that?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you again for playing the rapid fire round. This is something new that we have started on season 3, and a
Mm.
lot of people are liking it. And I hope I didn't challenge you a lot.
Oh, no, no, no. This is good.
Thank you again. You know, um, I think if I'm not mistaken, the national day for LGBTQ is June 1st. Is that correct?
Mm.
Now,
Yeah, it's a Pride Month. Yeah.
so so why is it that people, or I should say society,
Hmm.
as you said, social, right, brings the transgender into the LGBTQ community June 1st? Because I think you and I, we talked, uh, there's a different day for transgender. Is that correct?
It's usually, there are 2 days. One is the Transgender Day of Visibility, which is March 31st, and then Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is in November 20th.
Hmm.
And that's only specific for trans and gender expansive community. LGBTQ is to celebrate the entire LGBTQ spectrum, people who are within the community.
Mm,
So
mm,
that is why the Pride Month is more for people who are coming out and showing your pride that you belong to the LGBTQ community and you're different.
mm. Yeah, thank you again for explaining that, and thank you again,
Mm,
and congratulations whenever that's going to be in March. Let me ask you this here. When it comes to legal, okay,
mm.
there's a lot of things in play, right? First thing is which which bathroom to use, because that's male and female bathroom, isn't it? Now, I
Absolutely.
think if I'm not mistaken, back in 2017, they have passed a law that now it's neutral. Is that correct when it comes to the bathroom?
It's gender neutral, and sometimes trans people use the bathroom they identify in the gender that they are in.
Mm,
So for me, I cannot walk into a male bathroom like this. They may laugh at me or they'll say, "What are you doing here?" And if I walk into the female restroom, I'm more closer to identifying with the women in the restroom, which I've been many times. And what I find in the restroom is it's a vulnerable space. It's a really vulnerable space where you're going there to do your job and get out. You're
right,
not there to make conversations.
right,
And when I get to the bathroom, I always feel like I always look for acknowledgement from the women there. And honestly, they don't really care because everyone is going and doing the job. They put on their makeup, they put on the lipstick, and they keep doing what they want to do.
mm,
And to me, I cannot do that in a men's restroom, or I don't feel comfortable. I'm
mm,
more comfortable in a woman's restroom or in a gender neutral restroom where I usually go.
mm. Yeah.
So even in the gym, there is a gender neutral restroom in one of our gyms.
Wow.
So when I signed up, I registered and I said I'm gender non-binary, and they immediately said, "Oh, we have a gender neutral restroom. If you want to use, you can use,
Mm,
or you can use a female restroom if you want."
mm,
And this is California, so I think they're more accepting. I think human kindness. When they look at me, they feel like I want you to feel comfortable in our establishment.
mm,
You're our customer, and we want to treat you right.
mm,
And you're not there for any some fishy business.
mm, mm,
I'm there to do exercise, and I'm actually going to the gym after this. So there's a lot that comes out of human kindness and just loving human beings the way they are, the differences they bring to the table.
mm,
And that's what makes human beings and the human race more acceptable and interesting.
mm,
When we start restricting that and putting due to ignorance, a lot of time it's ignorance. And I always say this: you can always educate people who are ignorant, but you cannot educate folks who are arrogant.
mm,
Now, the ignorant folks are now slowly turning arrogant, where the legislature, they're passing the bills in so many states, and they're telling that you cannot use the bathrooms.
mm,
I sometimes feel worried because when I enter the bathroom, women's bathroom today in an airport in North Carolina or any place, it's like Arkansas, wherever. If I don't know what they're going to do. Sometimes that's one of the things why trans people are so scared and they start wearing adult diapers, and
mm,
they're so worried about how their people will respond to that. And some of them have learned to control the bladder,
mm,
and that can cause a lot of medical problems too, because you do not urinate for a long while, and
mm,
that can cause a lot of harm to your body.
mm,
And that's why we start educating the medical community that, hey, they're just there to do the job, and no incidents have not happened. Why are you being so caught up with that?
mm,
And that's where it bothers me that it's okay to be ignorant, but you cannot turn into an arrogant person. It's like telling a Sardarji that don't wear the turban. I don't want you to wear the turban in a
mm,
bowling alley because you're threatening to me. That happened in California, here in West Hollywood. And that can happen anywhere. It's not because they're targeting trans folks. It's just that they're targeting the unknown. The fear of the unknown is creating a lot of these misconceptions, which
mm,
can turn into hate,
mm.
which is where the fear comes from. When you educate people, I think it changes their attitude towards the trans community.
Because thank you again for that. You have explained about few things here.
Mhm,
You talked about the gender neutral bathrooms, right?
mhm,
And we talked about many other stuff too. But then the other thing, which I think we should all understand, is that you also touched upon race. You talked about
mhm,
diversities. You talked about different hatred throughout the different states.
mhm,
So my question is, I guess I already know the answer because you have already kind of answered it. I guess there's a difference between the West Coast and the East Coast, or even the Midwest for that
Mhm.
matter. So when do you think we'll come to the same level thought process, or is it just not the state level? I think it's around the world level, isn't it? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
In some parts of the world, there is acceptance. But if you take Middle East, for instance, they are okay with transgender community, but they are not okay with the gay community. The way they think is different. In India, transgender community is being more accepted. I had no problem going into the restroom in India, the women's restroom in India.
Mm,
But again, if there is an option for a gender neutral restroom, people will use it across the world.
mm,
That's probably where they feel more safe.
mm,
Now in US, it's become very political because they wanted to make it political, and I don't think in India they are going to make it political at all. If you want to pee, go pee. That's what they tell you,
right.
and they don't really care. When I think that's when you start humanizing the issue. You need to humanize the issues, then politicizing it, and that's where we get into this part of not accepting the person. But
Mm,
there are issues across the world even today in some states. In Russia, there are certain countries which are very much opposed to the LGBTQ community.
mm,
So when it's the whole community, then they have this fragment of hate and discrimination that is part of the fabric in the society,
mm.
which is very dangerous.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Thank you again for explaining that. I know that
mm,
we went in length, but I guess we do need to explain that to a lot of
mm,
people that around the world there's a difference between around the world. I mean, that's just what it
mhm,
is. Thank you again for that.
mm,
Uh, for the name change, I don't think there's much legalization. I mean, if you want to change your name, you can change your name, or is there a
mm.
struggle there too?
You can change your name if you want to. Initially, you had to get a doctor's certification.
Mm,
In certain states, even in India, sometimes they ask for medical certification to change your name, but now they don't require because a lot of them don't have to go through surgery. Surgery, it's a very difficult process. In India, it's much more affordable now, but still a lot of the I would say the after effects or the adverse effects that happens because of hormones and surgery is now being researched, and they found that people can live authentically without medically transitioning.
mm,
So it's possible for folks to do it. And when you do that, then you can also change your name. For
mm,
instance, today I can go and change my name in California.
mm,
I don't have a problem. But the reason, as an immigrant who is trans, it's much different because I have property back in India. Now I have other logistics I need to work with. Suppose if I have to sell my property back in India, I need to have my legal name still as Daniels there,
mm,
and it cannot change. I cannot change Celia. They're going to ask me, who is Celia? Do you have a certificate? Or it's going to get more complicated. I would rather not take that route. I would rather make sure that I sell my property in India with my legal name that I use, and then go with my name change. But name change is not an issue
mm,
for adults. Now, for children, they started thinking about, why do you need a name change? Do you have your parents' consent? So
mm.
there's a lot of questions when it comes to children. But with
Yeah.
adults, I think it's not an issue at all.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you again for explaining that. And
Mm,
there's a story that you and I actually chatted, on the pre-call of
mm,
what you have gone through. And I don't want to make you uncomfortable, so we're not going to go and talk about that
mm,
because that is something personal, and I feel that we should appreciate your privacy on that part. And I know what you. I hope you understand what I'm saying there.
mhm.
So I don't want to talk about that. But before you leave today, Cecilia, do you have any last words to all my Back to Basic listeners and my viewers? And how is your journey on Back to Basics too? On top of that,
Absolutely. I love this podcast because we are just up to the point. You want to make sure that the audience understand, and that's a very good way of making sure that we have more listeners listening to the story. One thought that I want to leave the audience with is called be an ally for the community. Now, when I use the word ally, ALLIES, A is acknowledge your privilege that you can help our community. L is listen to our stories, listen to why we are different. Another L is to learn to unlearn so that you will know that there are lots of things you can learn about our community. I is to initiate tough conversations and decisions. E is to educate yourself and to educate others. And S is to be supportive by by participating and by being involved. So I want to leave you with this term allies. You
Yeah.
can remember that very easily.
Of course, of course. Thank you so much for coming here and supporting me on my podcast, but
You're
telling
welcome,
your
Gary.
story and telling and explaining people that what's the difference between all the words that we mentioned today on the episode, and whoever's listening here, we're going to be having Cecilia also on Back to Basics on the business side of things, on the corporate side of things, or
Mhm.
where this person has made a mark. So there is a different podcast for that, which is Back to Basic Mode Business. So please connect us there, and that's part two of this amazing guest that I had today. And by the way, thank you again for coming here and sharing all your small nuggets, and hopefully you and I will chat more even after the second part of this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Girish, and thank you for what you're doing. You're changing lives, and thank you for helping us enhance these stories and empower people by listening to their stories. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, thank you again. So, guys, today we spoke with our guest today, Cecilia, if I'm not mistaken, and we talked about many different things. And there's one story that we did not tell because that's a privacy thing. I feel that that's a little something personal because she has shared definitely, and I don't think she minds it. But the thing is, I feel privacy is privacy, and that's just how I feel. But there's a lot of things that we have talked about the differences of transgender and cross dressing and neutral. All the words that we have mentioned today, she has explained it in an amazing way. So hopefully you guys can listen to it. But before you leave, there is a quote of the day from Back to Basics, and hopefully my guest will like the quote. The quote is, being transgender isn't a medical transition. It's a process of learning to love yourself for who you are. Because at the end of the day, it's a personal choice, isn't it? But at the end of the day, we have to respect it. At the end of the day, you have to be you. And that's what she mentioned too, ally. So rewind back, listen to those words, what she said. I'm going to say it in my way: relearn, unlearn, and learn, and learn. That's what I'm going to go and say. Guys, thank you again for coming on Back to Basics. And remember, what do we always say at the end of the episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care. See you next time on Back to Basics. How was that for you?
Thank you, Girish. You're really good. But
Thank
thank you for talking about the stories. And usually I do workshops where I explain a lot of the what we talk about. It's actually a complicated thing to explain a lot of these terminologies, and so I explain in a way they will understand. And I've even spoken to lawyers. Trust me, they were all very conservative lawyers in a pharmaceutical company,
you.
and I know how to uh, convince, or I would say make them move the needle a little bit. They were talking about compliance issues and how do you navigate between your legal name when your legal name is not really Celia. And I was explaining all that, and they actually onboarded me in a company when I went to consult with a firm. They told me my legal name doesn't match my background check, and so
Hi guys, thank you again for tuning in to Back to Basics and listening to the excellent episode that we had today with our guest. With your love and support, we do need you to at least rate our show, review our show, because it does make us stronger day by day, week by week, as I usually say on my episodes. And there are three things in this episode that it makes a hit for me, which is the content, the guest, and definitely the host. So guys, take care, God bless, and remember, everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care, God bless, and see you next time on Back to Basics.